Hello and welcome to Hightailing Through History, a history podcast where two sisters get high and surprise each other with a story from history. I'm Laurel, the older sister.
And I'm Katie, the younger sister.
And tonight we are joined by a special guest, my husband, Kristian. Hi, babe. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Everybody at this upcoming Olympics in Paris 2024.
Hey.
What is the date for that?
Today I thought was the opening ceremony.
No way. Really?
Yeah, because the unions just went on strike in the airports, so they're like ultra fucked.
The Paris Olympics this year, they are having a first time event of breaking. Probably going to be the last time we see breaking in the Olympics. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's really popular and people go, let's bring that back. Breaking as in breakdancing. But it's called breaking.
I heard that. And I'm
super excited.
That's sick as hell. We should have always had that. Like, that's like super. Remember all the early 2000s movies when you'd watch people like bust out some shit, like break their neck as they jump on it? And I'm like, I could never do that, but that looked cool.
Like Step Up.
Whoa.
Or something like that.
Okay, first of all, don't talk down about Step Up, but Step Up 2 is better.
Okay.
Meant for the streets.
I've not seen any of them. But anyway, breaking at the Paris Olympics. So, babe, we're so glad that you're here to hang out with us for another Olympic. I don't know. It's not even like you're here for the Olympics. It's like your own Olympic event, I guess. But speaking of Olympics, my guy, you were recently in a really famous Olympic stadium located in Berlin. So, babe, tell us all, why were you at the, what's it called? The Olympiastadion?
My mate from growing up in England, he lives there. He lives in Berlin. And we got tickets to the Euro final, England v Spain. So after England won the semi-final, we just did a quick plan the trip in one day, pack a bag, throw your passport in the bag, get to the airport, fly over to Berlin, see your mate for 3 days, and then go to the Olympic Stadium for the final. It was amazing.
Oh, sorry, babe, that your Lions didn't win the Euros, but
that's all right. No, yeah. It was well worth it anyway. Great experience.
Laurel, what are you partaking in this evening?
Yeah.
Well, I had a smoke. I had a little smoke, and then I've got half an edible. And then I was thinking about maybe, I was thinking of maybe getting myself a bourbon drink for later in honor of your story.
I mean, honestly, we're perfectly set up for it. So
I don't do bourbon, but I was like, this might be the night because we've got a special story coming up. So I think I'm going to have to figure out a way to make a bourbon drink, maybe a hot toddy.
Oh, ooh. Those are lovely as well. And your husband makes the best ones. Just gonna put it out there. Anytime I come over and I'm like dying, Kristian like makes the eye contact. He's like, do you want a I'm not even gonna attempt his accent because it's not happening today.
Do it, it'll be fun.
I can't with him in the room. If he wasn't here to hear it, I'd be fine with it.
Katie, you want a hot toddy? Toddy.
Is it toddy? Is it D or T?
Toddy.
Is it a D?
Yeah, it's a D.
Yeah,
hot toddy.
Hot toddy.
Hot. It's the way he says hot. Hot. I would say hot. I say hot with my nasal passage, and he says hot with the top of his throat.
Properly in English. Before we butchered it in America, we're like, this is being said this way now. And I don't even know what happened in Chicago. So.
Chicago.
Am I going to make one?
No, we'll do it at the break. It's fine. Thanks, though. Appreciate it.
At the break when we're refueling.
He's a guest and he makes our drinks. How about that? And Katie, what are you partaking of?
I partaking of? Juniper Terps. I don't know what that is. It's a botanical seltzer. It better be sweet. I didn't actually even think about that. Oh, you would like that. You would like that with gin.
Oh, what a cocktail that would be. A cocktail with some gin. Jeez. We missed you last episode.
Dude, I was so sad too.
I know. Oh.
I was just sadly watching you from my bed, like, sort of. I kept falling asleep. No offense to you. It was just with medical issues going on. I was just super tired. And yeah, I was sitting there and I was like, super sad about it. It's lonely without me here.
It is. It really was. It's such a weird recording experience too. So I much rather have somebody else that I can be talking to and telling, really cool historic things to, because otherwise it was just like myself, and I was like messing up on my words a lot.
This is cool.
A lot of editing. Oh. No one's laughing at my jokes that I wrote for myself in the paper. Yeah, so you were very much missed, but we're so glad you're back. Really glad to have friends here in the room, quite literally in the room, video wise, and also in the ears of the Smoke Circle for episode 87. It is season 3, episode 8. It's the final one of our season 3, and we have promised our favorite kind of history to finish it all off, and that is adventure history. So I've got a little smoke, a little edible. You've got a THC drink. Kristian's a couple of Disco Manhattans in. We're going to have a great time. So here we go, my friends. First up, we're going to take an adventure.
Oh, you're going first. I don't have to rock. Oh, thank goodness. Take it away, sister mine.
Should I?
No, you shouldn't. I'll end out the night.
Okay.
Carry on. This is all you. You take the stage.
All right. So first up, we are taking an adventure around the world, and I'm going to follow it up with a little bit of bootlegging and some running from the law. So Kristian, when you were on with me last time, which was an episode just you and I did together, it was episode 4, we talked about the worst race ever, foot race at least. So that was the 1904 Olympic Marathon. It was the 3rd modern Olympics ever. Of the modern Olympics, and it was also the first one that was held in the United States. And if you listen to that episode, or we'll be doing so soon, which I would highly recommend, of course, it was an absolute shit show. And it was like the Murphy's Law of marathons. Like whatever could go wrong did. It nearly killed some of those participants. It was bananas. So in that spirit of things, my dear, and my dear Katie and our dear friends of the Smoke Circle, I am taking us forward in time only 4 years from that fateful shitty marathon in 1904 to the 1908 great car race around the world. The late 19th and 20th centuries was this moment in human history where technology and innovation boomed. Industrially speaking, this is where the second industrial revolution happens, like steel, railroad, oil, like all those barons like Vanderbilt and Rockefeller and stuff like that. Yeah, it enters the lexicon of American history.
What a last name to have as well, dude.
Rockefeller, Vanderbilt.
I know.
I mean, unfortunately, those are like names where you're like, you hear me go, well, makes sense that they were rich. They have richy sounding names.
They do. They came out bougie. I didn't.
Alas.
I mean, I did emotionally and like in personality wise, but my name's not bougie.
Oh yeah.
I have but a peasant's name. My dear. I am not worthy. But then you meet me. I am so far up my own ass. It's not even funny.
The funny thing is, you don't even use your whole name.
No, I don't. First of all, that acronym is great.
You've just chopped parts of it out, and you're like, well, I could just use my first and middle initial and it's still my first name.
I went like the superhero route. Like I like to think of myself sort of as Batman. I didn't need the full name. Okay? You can't contain me even in these 2, I almost said syllables. Actually, it is 2 syllables, but
it's 2 syllables. Yeah. So yes, we have the richy riches, the oil and the railroad and the steel, like those tycoons. Sure. But then in the spirit of like adventure, we also have the Wright brothers with their first flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903. And then Frederick Cook and Robert Peary competing for the conquest of the North Pole and claiming to have completed said quest in 1908 and 1909, respectively. Then the automobile is invented. Did I say automobile or Beal?
I definitely heard veal.
Okay. Gross. So here's some contention. So German Karl Benz is often credited with inventing the automobile in 1866. But then you'll see some other historians say that it was Frenchman Nicolas Joseph Cugnot, there we go, who made one back in 1799. And then I saw yet another source that said Scotsman Robert Anderson created the first electric carriage between 1832 and 1839. So I think what it comes down to for car historians and like gearheads like that, it comes down to the criteria of like, what are we calling a car? Like what makes it a car? You know, four wheels.
Because I have very strong opinions on this.
Yeah. But so that's for other people to argue about. It's not for me. I'm just going to present. These are a few different names that come up. But what I will say is that most people give the flowers to Carl Benz, as in like Mercedes-Benz. And we'll say that the Germans and the French were far and away at the forefront of automobile technology. Now, by the time we get to the early 20th century, the car is new. It's a toy for the rich. And this is particularly important for our piece of history today, it is unreliable. It is unproven. It's called a horseless carriage. People are like, this is never going to catch on. This is a dumb idea. It breaks down all the time. The tires are little and skinny.
Yeah.
Like shit goes wrong on it all the time. The roads weren't great yet. I mean, they were basically still trails for horses and carriages and wagons and things like that. And there's just mud all the fucking time.
Weren't these the cars that you had to like wind up out front?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no.
There's all kinds of stuff that you had to do.
Yeah, they were not great.
And so people thought, like, if you were going to go on any sort of long journey, you need to go by horse, because like otherwise you're never going to make it, or you're going to break down, or at least bring a horse with that can help like tow and pull you out of the mud, or at least somebody can hop on the horse and ride to the next town to get help. Like, have a horse with you. If you're not going to take the horse, or if you're not going to actually like use the horse for transportation, like take him with you.
So the car wasn't very fast either if the horse is keeping up with you.
So overall, people thought this is expensive and stupid and it's never going to catch on, and cars are dumb, basically. And for context, a car costs about $4,000, which if we inflation that out for today, whatever the word for that would be, it would be about $138,000.
Jesus hell. I was like, whoa, that's like a house.
Yeah, you know how, I mean, there are some cars that cost that sort of amount of money, right? So it's like, those are the sort of people that have.
Not within like, you know, what normal people buy.
Exactly, which is why these were for the luxury vehicles. Yeah, it was just like a little fun thing to have. So imagine that during this time period where humans were just trying new stuff with just a load of gumption and can-do attitude, simply to see if they could do it. To be like, hey, this is a thing we should do. That there are two newspapers, one in France, Le Matin, and the New York Times, and they announced a car race around the world from New York City to Paris. Now,
I have one question about all of this.
Okay.
I'm no expert in geography, as was pointed out to me when I thought Bolivia was over in the Middle East. It's in South America. But I am going to say I'm pretty sure, like I'm 99.99% sure, one, that this might already be taking effect, two, that there's an ocean in between these two cities, and I have a lot of questions.
You are asking all the right questions, and I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability. So due to how unreliable cars were and how they were more of a novelty item of the rich, car racing was initially used to boost car sales. And these races were really popular with the public and just a fun bit of entertainment. Small street races and ovals and like some looping tracks, but it's not like these great undertakings like a race around the world.
No.
And that's a whole other story. Like this would be a massive undertaking. Let's be honest, like today, if someone was like, we're going to race around the world from, you know, westward from New York City around to Paris, you'd be like, damn, okay. Like today we have we have a lot of technology that can monitor the car, like cars are computerized and you can monitor these things and you'd have teams and all this sort of stuff. And there's actually roads and like stuff, but it's still a big undertaking. So when we're looking at these early model cars, when the infrastructure of so many of these countries, such as roads and places to stop and get gasoline, like all these things weren't really set up yet. But seeing as this is the 20th century, and as I mentioned, people were just doing shit just to see if they had the ability to do it for, I mean, nothing more than maybe a bottle of champagne and bragging rights. The Great Car Race excited the public imagination, and various European teams began to enter. The prize was a big bronze trophy and bragging rights. So France had 3 cars in the race. This is a bit redundant sounding. The Dion, there we go, the Moto Blanc, and the César Nadim. Italy had the Zust, and Germany entered their car, the Protos. Now, all 5 of these cars were specially designed and made for this race and tested for it. And they're like, this is our entry. In total, 17 men participated in the race. Or there were a mix of drivers, mechanics, and journalists. People is just, because that's the thing, it's not like you know, there's just somebody like going along in the back writing it down and taking pictures and stuff like that with their old cameras and stuff.
And you had to take your pit crew with.
Yeah, so everyone's like hopped on and like riding on the
These cars are already not well manufactured. Now you're adding more weight.
Yeah, there's at least like 3 or 4 people on each team for the most part. This is
an entire shit show.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. So each of the people in the team, they would rotate, you know, right? There'd be a certain leg of the trip that they would drive. So the driver rotated.
Oh, you didn't even get to sit there for free. You had to work.
Yeah, everyone's working here. Everyone's working. And like I said, about 3 or 4, 2 to 4 people per car at various times, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. So let's meet some of the contestants, shall we? Because they're all great fun. That was my favorite part of the 1904 Olympic Marathon, by the way, in that episode. There are some characters. Felix Carvajal won my heart. He's probably one of my favorite people we've ever talked about in history. In the De Dion, there we go, for France, was driver Guy Bossier de Saint-Chaffrey. He's a 36-year-old a French aristocrat who once organized a motorboat race from Marseille to Algiers that resulted in every single one of the boats sinking in the Mediterranean Sea. So there's a good start.
Holy shit. I was going to make a motorboating joke, but now...
I'm not sure about. I don't know if.
I'm so glad Kristian's here. Laurel doesn't find my 12-year-old humor as funny as you do.
Yeah,
I like that one. That was a good one.
Thank you.
Could you imagine a motorboat race across the Mediterranean? That was so.
Your mouth would be so tight.
Oh my gosh. This is how it goes. The boat can only go so long as actual sound is happening during the motorboating. Like that's the sound effects, like that, and that's how you get across. And if at any point you have to stop and take a breath, they have to stop the boat.
You just have to have people lined up and going one after another.
Yeah. Workshop that, you guys. That's your homework over the summer break. The motorboat race across the Mediterranean. Oh, anyway, so that's how well his race went. And his captain was Hans Hendrik Hansen. I love that. So much alliteration. A, quote, swashbuckling Norwegian, dig it, who claimed to have sailed a Viking ship solo to the North Pole. I can't back up any of that claim because, as I said, the first North Pole, South Pole expedition where people have come back from it are happening in 1908 and 1909, let alone...
I was going to say, it took a long time.
Yeah, let alone him coming into the race being like, this is a thing that I did. I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. But anyway, I'm just going to leave him to his claim because it was well over 100 years ago, and I'm not here to start a fight. But anyway, he's our swashbuckling Norwegian. He's on the De Dion.
Katie's fighting him right now in the history books.
She sure is. So that's the De Dion. In the other French car, the Moto Blanc, we have Frenchman Charles Goddard, who participated in the Peking to Paris. So that's another long distance race that was recently held the year prior in 1907. And so not only does he have long distance car racing experience, but this is fun. He did that race without having driven a car before. And he set an endurance record by driving single-handedly for 24 hours nonstop. In the Zoost for Italy, we have driver Emilio Sertori, who brought with him 21-year-old journalist and poet Antonio Scarfoglio, who had threatened to pilot a motorboat across the Atlantic if his father wouldn't let him join this car race.
What is with the motorboating with these guys?
I know. Father, if you will not let me go on this race, I'm going to take a boat and I'm just going to drive it across the Atlantic myself. And his dad's like, you know what, son, fine. You know, when you're 21 years old and no one can tell you anything. So his dad's like, yeah, whatever, fine, go on this race. Now on to Germany. The driver of the German Protos was 31-year-old aristocrat Lieutenant Hans von Koppen, who looked at this great car race as a way to bump him up from a lieutenant to a captain. He was granted a leave of absence from the 15th Prussian Infantry in order to join the race. And like Charles Goddard in the Peking to Paris race, Lieutenant Koppen joined the New York to Paris race, not knowing how to drive, but basically thought, how hard could this be? I've read some books. I'll watch the other guys in the car. I'm sure it's not difficult. So now let's look at the planned course. It began in Times Square, New York City, went west to Chicago, and then the cars would cross the Rocky Mountains in northern Nevada, arrive in San Francisco, where they would then take a steamship to Seattle. They would change ships from Seattle to Valdez, Alaska, and from Valdez, they would then cross up through Alaska, the Bering Strait, and then go across all of Russia. Sounds cold and long.
I was going to say, that's going to be a cold drive.
Freezing Siberia, right? To Europe. So Poland, Germany, France, ending in Paris at the Champs-Élysées and the Eiffel Tower.
You couldn't go south to China, dude? Like, it's warmer.
That's the proposed route. Now, whether this route fully gets taken or not is going to be a different story.
I got it.
That's what the race was going to be. The trip is estimated to take 6 months. And in case you're wondering how it worked with the boats, if a car lost its lead waiting for passage on a ship and the other cars were able to catch up to it, it would be granted the same lead when it disembarked. There we go.
When they get fucking dropped off.
Yeah. And the other cars would be held back. It was a total of very nearly 23,000 miles or 37,015 kilometers, with 13,341 of them, or 21,470 kilometers, to be taken by car. So that was the length of the whole race. And again, massive undertaking, the likes of which were only comparable to probably the expeditions to the South and North Poles, right? Like something this big.
But that's a big deal today, dude. That's a long time. That's going to take a lot of time. You're going to be very tired. And when are you going to sleep in the back? When are you going to rest? It's not going to happen, man. You better rest on the ship.
The fortitude and the gumption and the drive to do any of this sort of stuff is pretty amazing, because these are all big deal things today, let alone 100 and plus 20, like nearly 20 years ago. That's crazy. Bravo.
We were made of sterner stuff, man.
Yeah. I mean, it says something too, like that the American public voted in Teddy Roosevelt. Like, that's the president right now, is Teddy Roosevelt. So it's like, of course, that we're doing a car race around the world.
Okay. Oh, good old Teddy, man. He feared nothing.
That will be very important to keep in mind throughout this entire story tonight, is that roads barely exist. In France and Germany, the countries that were already pioneering automotive technology, they had great roads. Siberia, East Asia, America, like outside of the cities, no roads, not really. More like trails and paths for wagons and carts and stuff like that.
We still don't have good roads.
Yeah.
If you come to the Midwest, it's like a menagerie of potholes. Like,
and up to this point, only 9 cars had ever crossed the United States, and that was during warmer months. So yikes. Here we go. Now, American car companies had this really interesting opportunity in front of them that no one seemed to be thinking about taking. Now, remember that the American opinion on cars is that they're unproven, they're unreliable, and their overall sales just aren't amazing. So Mr. Thomas of the E.R. Thomas Motor Car Company of Buffalo, New York was like, wait a gosh darn moment. You mean to tell me that there's a great car race around the world. Starts in New York. It goes across this whole country of ours, and not a single American team is entered. Well, I can't have that now. That's
I was wondering when America was going to get involved.
Yeah, so America gets involved, but
that's
late.
What they do, Laurel. I don't know if you've met America, but if they do anything, it's get involved.
So he's like, this is going to be great publicity, right? You know, I'm going to enter one of my cars and get some publicity from this race. And they were really, really confident about their entry. As he gets really close to the race date, he signs up one of his vehicles to join and gets crowd favorite, like this really gregarious sort of guy, and actually a race car driver, like an actual race car driver, Monty Roberts, to man the Thomas Flyer. The Thomas Flyer was a 4-cylinder, 60 horsepower Model 36. Had no top, had no windshield. It was an iron frame that had canvas stretched over it. Woof.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Wright brothers had a better manufactured airplane than that thing.
Now, the E.R. Thomas Motor Company was probably the leading muscle car company. At the time, in these early days of the automobile, they had the most cars that were over 40 horsepower, which is a lot. It's like it's like a company that makes like a Shelby
back then. That's
Charger
huge.
And it makes all like the big muscle cars, right? And unlike the rest of the vehicles entered into this race, the Thomas Flyer was not specially built for the race or tested or anything like that beforehand. It was chosen from the customer lot only 3 days before the start date. So it's basically like going to the local car dealership and being like, yeah, that Mustang right there, I'm going to just take it into a race.
It's like going to the used car dealership and I'll take that one right there.
Well, at least this one was new. They had just recently built it, but it just wasn't built for the race. Our main character of this historic adventure also was chosen last minute before the race, and that is brilliant mechanic and bicycle race competitor George Schuster. And Schuster was one of 21 kids born with German immigrant parents. No.
Good Lord.
No. And it was said in the documentary that I watched by his great-grandson. The documentary wasn't by his great-grandson. He was interviewed in it. But he was saying great-grandfather was asked to be a driver and mechanic for the Thomas Flyer the night before the race. That he was in Providence, Rhode Island, I believe on a trip with his family, because if he wasn't on a trip with his family, none of the rest of this story actually makes sense. But that he gets a phone call from Mr. Thomas himself asking him to be a part of the Thomas Flyer team and the great car race around the world. Now, understanding the importance of what he was being asked, he told his boss, well, I've got a suitcase of dirty laundry and a bit of a cold, but yes, sir, I'll do it. And he spends that evening saying goodbye to his wife and kids, and without any sort of preparation, goes to New York. February 12th, 1908. Times Square is packed with 250,000 people stretching from Broadway up until Harlem. Due to how busy it was, like how many people deep this was and the throngs of people that were there, the mayor who was supposed to start the race, George B. McClellan Jr., son of the Union Civil War general, was unable to get through the crowds to go kick everything off. So businessman and railroad guy Colgate Hoyt just like picks the little golden starting pistol up from the table, just goes, boom, all right, fucking go, let's get out of here. So the race starts 15 minutes late, 11:15, bing, ching, all right, and they go, the race is underway. Now it doesn't take long before one of the 6 cars drops out. One of the French cars, the Césaire Naudin, breaks a rear axle after only 96 miles, or 154 kilometers, and they're out. So down to 5 already. The De Dion, the Zeus, and the Thomas Flyer quickly emerged as the leaders, with the Protos and the Moto Blanc bringing up the rear. But unfortunately, these remaining 5 cars would face a big test very early. As they headed west through New York, they were hit by a bad blizzard, which only seemed to get worse the further west that they went. So like the more they were driving, the worse it got. A lot of these cars don't have like heaters and windshield. It's not like a car today where you're like enclosed in it at least, and you have like a heater, you can get toasty. No, the flyer didn't have a windshield, let alone a top, so it's like just flying in their face and it's cold. So they were trudging single file then at this point through foot deep snow during this blizzard. And then once the blizzard was through, they had to brave what the New York Times called the worst road in America, which stretched out from Auburn, New York. And the 3 leading cars get stuck in swamplands and just so much mud. And the Italians came through. They've got an American guide and a team to help pull them out. So already things are tough between the mud and the snow. They haven't left New York yet. As the days went on, they get into this routine of rising at 5 a.m., driving all day, camping down for the night at 8 p.m. And then basically from 8 p.m. to midnight, the mechanics would be tinkering on the cars, draining the engines because antifreeze doesn't exist yet, and then just like going through it and just making sure everything's going to work for the next day. But soon, though, it starts to turn into an actual race with some competition. There's kind of a bit of like this, I don't know, camaraderie at first of like, hey, we're all in this race together. But then after a while, people are like, well, wait a second. What if that team leaves in the middle of the night and they get a couple hours ahead of us? Wait a second. And then so there's like that distrust that's starting to seep in. And they're like, oh, game on. We've got a race now. The Frenchman of the De Dion, Saint Chaffray, the aristocrat who did the motorboating race across the Mediterranean, he said to the American team, when you wish to go into a city ahead, you ask me. I'm like, bro, it's not your say. This is a race. And that's pretty much what the other Americans said. They said, oh, from now on, you will know it's a race. Like, don't tell us what to do.
Right.
As they trekked across the Midwest in the middle of winter, middle of February here, which, as we know, as Midwesterners, is covered in snow. It's cold. It's windy. It's absolute dog shit. No one wants to be here. The Italian team, as the animosity grows here, the Italian team accuses the Americans of cheating and using the railroad tracks and even using a trolley. Some of the other European competitors didn't like that the Americans in the towns that they traveled through were far more willing and excited even to help the American team, but demanded more money to help them, the European teams. And some of the aristocratic Europeans were like, the peasants are asking us for $5 when they only ask $3 of the other, the American team. It's like, well,
they're gonna help the home team.
Yeah, they're gonna help the home team.
Yeah, of course.
That's how it's gonna go in every other country.
I was gonna say, and when they get to France at the very end, guess what? Nobody's gonna help the Americans there.
So it's the tensions are growing, and the Thomas Flyer is in Colorado by March 8th. And they have a new team member, the Norwegian Hans Hendrik Hansen, formerly of the French De Dion team. And here's what happened. Y'all ready for the tea? The Norwegian had quit the team after the De Dion got stuck in a particularly bad snowdrift. And when Hansen couldn't dig out the De Dion and like get it unstuck, Saint Chaffray was like, well, you're no good. What do I have you on the team for? Like, you're supposed to be able to get it out. You've gone to the Arctic, by God, And so they start arguing back and forth. And being that this is the time period and the sort of class level that we're looking at, they're like, we're going to settle this matter with a duel. Because let's grab some pistols and shoot each other at dawn.
Because that has worked out so well in history.
But thankfully, they couldn't find the pistols. And St. Chaffray was like, hey, how about you're just fired from the team? And Hansen's like, well, I could walk through this route. I could walk through Siberia and still beat the De Dion car. So peace. I'm joining the Americans. So from henceforth, I'm going to call him part of the American team, even though just know there is a Norwegian on there. So he is now American.
He has changed sides.
He's changed his allegiances. Just so you can envision where everyone is. The Zeus is in Omaha, Nebraska. The De Dion is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The Moto Blanc is in Maple Park, Illinois. The Protos is just a bit behind in Geneva, Illinois. And again, the Thomas Flyer is in Colorado. All the while, people would come out to cheer on the cars as they would come through the town, because for a lot of these people along the route, This was their first time seeing an automobile in action. It was super exciting. By Wyoming, the American team changed out their drivers. Monty Roberts no longer wanted to drive. He's like, I've got other things to do. There's other races coming up I want to be a part of. This is taking too long, but I'll see you when you guys get to Europe. So he pieces out. There are two other drivers who took some shifts for the American team, but it was George Schuster who really sticks with it, like 100%. He like at night, if they're running out of gas, he like goes and walks to the next town to pick up the gasoline and find some. He's working on the car late. He's like just sticks with this car. By the time that the Americans left Wyoming, they were ahead of the other cars by 2 full states. The Italians were starting to cross Nebraska from Omaha. St. Chaffrey was in Iowa, waiting for parts for his De Dion. Lieutenant Coppin was in the Protos, and Charles Goddard and the Moto Blanc were only just entering Iowa. So we've gotten really spread out now. The Moto Blanc begins having mechanical problems, and Charles Goddard is just about to put his Moto Blanc on a train and head it west to San Francisco, aka cheating. But photographer catches him and is like, "Hey, fella, what you doing?" He's like, "Nothing." Not that.
Not about to put it on a train.
Not about to put it on the train. Wasn't doing that at all, because that would be cheating, and that's not what I am about. I am a good sport. So that didn't happen, but thankfully for Charles Goddard, instead of getting disqualified or getting into any sort of trouble, he gets a telegraph from the owners of the Moto Blanc, and they're just like, "Get out there, just quit the race, sell the car. We're done with this. We're over this race now. Come on home." So now the race is down to 4 cars. The Thomas Flyer went from Utah through Nevada, around the border of Death Valley, no thank you, and arrived in San Francisco during the 3rd week of March, a whole 900 miles or 1,448 kilometers ahead of the closest competitor, the Zeus.
It's not even close.
It's not even close. Now, the Americans that were following the race were super thrilled to hear that not only has it been done that just the car has crossed the country in this great race, but it's the American car. And they're like, yippee, ding, 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 ring some bells. Everybody celebrate. Now, it's George Schuster's turn to drive. He takes over in San Francisco. The car gets a boat, gets ferried up to Seattle from San Fran. From Seattle, it goes up to Valdez, Alaska. When the Flyer gets to Alaskan shores, the entire town of Valdez, it's like 800 something people, they turn out to see the car get off the dock because it was the first ever car in Alaska. And they're very excited. Now, in this new, super cold, snowy, so much snow, this new terrain, George Schuster's like, I'm going to go and scout the route ahead and see how we're going to be able to do this. But the snowdrifts were so bad, and it was such a mess that he came back and he said he went on in a horse. He went on a sleigh. He didn't drive ahead yet. But he came back to the car and was like, there is literally no way we're going to be able to do this unless we dismantle the cars, put them on a dog sled, and dog sled them across Alaska.
I was going to say that's literally the only way.
Yeah, and then good luck when we get to the Bering Strait, and hopefully that all goes well. So the race organizers back in Paris are like, it's cool. Don't worry about it. We're not going to go through Alaska. So get everyone back to Seattle. Once everyone's in Seattle, one by one, we'll ferry you across the ocean. We're going to take you to Japan, and then from Japan to Russia, and then Russia drive to Paris. Then you can pick it up again. You can pick up the race
like
route.
The biggest. That's going to take weeks to get to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a massive ocean.
Yeah.
Like, the biggest one, in fact. And that takes a long time.
So they get shipped across from Seattle.
They're still doing this? Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. They're just like, all right, well, this is how we get across the ocean then. So the good thing is they don't have to go across Alaska, but they are going to be on a ship for a little bit longer. And when the Flyer first gets to Japan, they land in Kobe, and it's a whole bunch of really excited, curious people to be like, oh, hey, there's this car race coming through here. So this is also the first cars to go through Japan. And in a documentary that I watched about it, it was like TV episode documentary. George Schuster is recorded as saying that the roads in Japan, he's like, they were good, but they were really narrow because they were made for rickshaws, carts, single horse carriages. So they weren't as wide as they needed to be for the cars. And therefore, as these cars traveled through Japan, they had to, well, the roads were so narrow that sometimes they would have to just like find ways around narrow bridges and just be like, well, we got to keep driving until we can get across without a bridge because the bridge is so narrow we can't get across. Or they would just literally pick up the car and like carry it.
That'll do it though.
They would do it.
Problem solved.
And that all adds time, right? Then when they get across to like mainland Asia, like continental Asia, whatever the wording for that is, the next leg is from Manchuria to Siberia. And then after the completion of the Trans-Siberia Railroad, the roads, if they could even be called that in the first place, like the trails that they already have for people traveling through there, they had hardly been touched, because once you've got a railroad going across the country, you're not going to want to just like hoof it on the trails. Like, you're just going to take the railroad if you can. So the roads are doubly not good, and also like Siberia, right? The mud is so deep. It's pounds and pounds of it are just caked onto the cars. They're trying to wash them off as best they can. But so deep. Katie, cover your ears if anyone's sensitive about animals. The mud was so deep the horses couldn't even get a footing, and they were saying the horses were literally drowning in the mud because there was practically no bottom to it. That's a huge problem. So get to Siberia.
It's like the never-ending story all over again, dude, with Artax. It's terrible.
Oh, that's what I thought about too, Artax. And I was just like, this is really a sad sentence. So I was like, I'm just going to say it really quick because it is important to like realize how bad it was, but also like don't want to dwell on it. Siberia. So Siberia. I feel like all I have to do is say Siberia and everyone goes, oh, like, woof, this is going to suck. Schuster just fucking worked on it all like day and night, just kept trudging along. The Protos, they're having their issues. That's the German team. They're like parked outside of a hotel waiting for parts from Moscow because, parts aren't easy to get. The flyer's needing repairs. So you be waiting however long it took to get a part shipped over, like by boat, by railroad, to get to wherever you were in the world. So you were losing hours on repairs and days waiting for your parts to come. So Siberia was a fucking slog, you guys. But we do get this like one little glimmer of like high spirits outside of Vladislavstok. I hope I got that right. In Siberia. So just one little moment of like nice sportsmanship to lift our spirits a bit. The flyer comes across the Protos, stuck in the mud. And instead of going around them and being like, see you later, suckers, they throw a line out to the Protos to literally like pull them and tow them out of the mud.
That car has enough horsepower to do that?
I guess, right? It's pretty impressive. They pull it out.
I've never been impressed with American engineering before, but today I am.
Yeah, this little car, it's amazing. Now, Lieutenant Coppin, who was driving the Protos, he's so touched by the gesture. And he's like, that is so rad. You know what? Hey, I've been saving this bottle of champagne to like crack open on our triumphant entry into Paris. Yeah. We're all going to share this together out in the tundra. So he's like popping the bottle of champagne and cheersing and toasting the American teams and German teams together. So you got that going for you. So
that's
a nice
Laurel, that's there. Magical. Don't
it's
take
so
that.
Cute.
It's like the one glimmer of hope, dude.
One nice thing that we got going on here.
You gave me a lot of bad before that.
Around the same time, the same town too, is learned that the Protos we were just talking about cheated and took a train from Idaho to Seattle. And they were initially disqualified.
Why you gotta ruin it?
I know. But they appealed and instead were issued a 30-day penalty, which is huge.
Massive.
30-day penalty. Also, in Vladislavstok, the Italian and American teams get this message from Saint Chaffrey of the De Dion. He's like, come to my room. I got something to share with you. So they get there and he says, there's no petrol. There's no gasoline anywhere around here. Quote, there's no means of getting any. What there was is now in my possession, meaning I've stolen all the gas in the town. Like I've bought all the gas. There isn't any. And I will offer it to the car, which will agree to take me on board. Now the Italians are like that, get out of here, like that, leave the room. They're disgusted. And St. Chaffrey then just turns to the American team and is like, hey, this is a good deal for you. You can have the gasoline now. And
so Chaffrey was on
the Day Dion. He was one of the French drivers.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He's like, because I could get a seat on the German car. Like, they'll give me a seat, but it won't look so good for a Frenchman to be riding into Paris on a German car. So it's better if I ride in with you guys. Now, George Schuster is like, I'll think about it. Meanwhile, he is like seething mad. And he goes to his team. He's like, no, we're not taking him up on that offer. I would rather stay here in this town for the rest of my life than take this bribe. So, there's some drama. So the Day Dion withdraws. And he gives the gasoline to the Italians, but the Italians don't give him a seat on the Zoost. So now there's 3 cars that are in it. The flyer was given a 15-day allowance because George scouted ahead in Alaska. Like, he not only was far ahead anyway when they got to Alaska, but then he scouted ahead. They had to find the new route. So he did a good thing for the race in general. And then he had to go all the way back down to Seattle to cross over the ocean. So he lost some time there while the other cars were crossing. So the race organizers gave him and the team a 15-day allowance. So you get like a bonus 15 days. Also keep in mind the Protos has their 30-day penalty. So now onward across Russia, which all in all was just a hard trek. Such a hard trek. Schuster gets lost a few times. The Protos is getting ahead. The Italians are about 3,000 miles behind. Hours get added into days with wrong turns and repairs and all kinds of stuff that all these cars are doing. So it's a whole mess once we get across Russia. So that's a lot of the race right there. Finally, 6:15 p.m. on Sunday, July 26th, 5.5 months and 21,933 miles from the start in Times Square, Lieutenant Coppin arrives in Paris in the Protos. And the French crowds went silent. They were not happy to have the German car coming into Paris. Correct. They were pissed. So the editors of Le Matin, who had come out to greet the first crowds, they were like, welcome to Paris, I guess. It's a very tepid welcome. They serve him a cold buffet.
They're so fucking sour about it.
They're so sour about it. At the same time, in Berlin, though, George Schuster is having breakfast at the Imperial Auto Club. And now, technically, Schuster still has a month, just because with all of the allowances and the takeaways and stuff, right? So, because remember, the German Protos has a 30-day penalty. Right. He has a 15-day allowance. So, by all technicalities, he still has at least a month to get to Paris and win the race still. And he's in Berlin. On the evening of July 30th, Schuster and his crew arrived in Paris, and the crowds were much more excited to see them. The crowds were like, Vive le car Americain! And the crowds are all like running around the car, and they're like, yeah. But this fuddy-duddy police officer is like, stop. You're under arrest because you have no lights on your car. The headlights are broken because everything's breaking on this car now. Well, not everything. There's just, there's a lot of repairs to be made. So the headlights are out, and the police officer's pissed because you can't drive a car on Paris streets at night without headlights. And he's like,
it's
no.
the city of freaking lights. There's lights everywhere.
And the lights have got to be on your fucking car, too. You can't have them just around you. That's not how it works. It has to be on your car. The law is the law. You're under arrest, George Schuster. The crowds are like, what? No, he's part of this race. And he's like, I won't hear it. So a man, quick thinking, thankfully, he has a bicycle that has a headlight on it. And he picks up his bicycle and he puts it in the car next to Schuster in like a little seat next to him. And the police officer's like, yeah, I mean, this will do. That's fine. Go ahead. And waves him on. Doesn't arrest him. I love it. I like that he was like, I don't care about your race. The law is the law, and I'm going to arrest you because you do not have headlights on your car. Schuster graciously insisted that Monty Roberts, the original driver, be present when the Thomas Flyer returned back to Times Square on August 17th, 1908. Which was very gracious of him, yes.
Yeah.
After the parties died down, after all like the accolades and the flowers are thrown and given and stuff, he returns to his job at the Thomas factory, where he was promised to be employed there for as long as the company was in business, which alas was only 5 more years before the company collapsed and all of its goods were auctioned off. Part of that auction was lot number 1829, simply listed as, quote, the famous New York to Paris racer. That lot number, 1829, the Thomas Flyer, is in the National Auto Museum in Reno, Nevada. Schuster was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame in 2010. What a badass that man was. And at the time that a lot of my sources were either written or recorded, they were saying that the Thomas Flyer still runs. Like you can still start the engine on that baby. At least it did after 96 years. I mean, my sources are a little bit older, but
it's still
96 years later, it was still working. And the record is still held for this race by the Thomas Flyer of racing around the world at this distance. And that, everybody, is the 1908 Great Car Race around the world. Oh, hey there, race champion. We're back from our little trip around the world. We hope you had a great time with that one, the 1908 Great Car Race around the world. We hope you enjoyed that little adventure. I'm on a little adventure myself, actually, and so I am doing this mid-roll from the hotel room, so I apologize for any echoes and maybe some bad sound during this. I just want to check in. I hope you're doing great. I hope you're enjoying yourself so far, and to remind you to please like, rate, review, all these things that help our little podcast grow. They really mean so much to us, all the likes, the subscribes, the follows, and the comments on YouTube. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this is our last episode of season 3. We'll be back again in 6 weeks, which will be September 3rd. But in the meantime, if you miss us, please visit us on Instagram at Hightailing History or on TikTok at Hightailing History Pod. And over on Patreon, we have our Best Buds Club. We'll be putting up some more content in that 6-week break. So if you really miss us, head on over there. You can sign up to be a member of the Best Buds Club for free, or you can join a paid tier, sling us a few bucks, and to get some extra content and the bonus episodes and stuff. But at least you can see what's going on over there as a free member. That's patreon.com/hightailing through history. Up next, Katie is following up with some more adventure history, but like adventure, more true crime, with the king of the bootleggers, George Remus. And with that, let's puff pass it on to part 2. Nice. So here's how I'm going to pass this baton here, Katie. Doom, tube, go, hit, Mickey, mouse, bubble, gum, whatever your words were when you were running track, running your relays, you know, like you do. There is a connection with car racing and Katie's next story. This is not why we're doing these stories. We're doing these stories because, one, I feel like at this point it's just become my thing where I feel like I should tell Kristian a race story or some sort of sports history every time. But our mister here, he likes bourbon, and there's a really interesting story that Katie has next. Now, I didn't originally connect these two this way, but during my research, there is a connection between car driving or car racing and Southern bootleggers. And that's because during Prohibition, the bootleggers would use modified cars to like go fast, right? And get away from authorities.
Yeah, they were souped up.
And then be able to handle the mountain roads in like Appalachia and Smoky Mountains and stuff like that. And so they would they'd have these makeshift cars and they would race them against each other. And that was NASCAR's early years. So there's a little bootlegging and car race history, just giving a little smooch. And Katie is going to take it away with her story.
We've all heard of Al Capone, John Dillinger, Machine Gun Kelly, the real one, not this one of today, like the original gangster Machine Gun Kelly, Pretty Boy Floyd, and even Bugs Moran. How many of you know who George Remus is?
I do. I recognize the name from bourbon bottles.
Now you just dive that little spoon into your cereal and hang in there, and I'm going to tell you all about him. George Remus, he was a wheeler and a dealer, a shrewd schemer, and I dare say if he was sorted into a house at Hogwarts, it would have been in Slytherin. I did, Laurel. Thank you. What's wrong with Slytherin?
No, that's just an interesting way to take that one.
I may have been high when I wrote this.
Sounds about right.
Oh yeah. George Remus is was German born in a town. So fantastic. I was definitely high when I wrote these. So, was born in Germany in a town called Landsberg on November 13th, 1876. His parents were named Frank and Marie Remus, and they all departed Europe in 1882 from a port in Norway. And that was all when George was only 4. They finally arrive in the United States on June 15th of 1882. George had 2 siblings, a sister named Frances, and a brother named Herman, who was younger and was born in America. For a short time, the Remus family made their first home in Baltimore, Maryland. And then they quickly moved to, you'll recognize this one, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Algonquin for the good land.
Wait, actually? What is that from? Stop laughing at me.
Sorry. I hope it is. I actually don't know that for sure. I look like a big dickhead. It's from Wayne's World.
Yeah, get in. So they moved into Milwaukee for a brief time before finally settling in Chicago. While in Chicago, Remus found work as a lumber scorer. It was here that his brother Herman was born, and sadly, in 1913, Herman was accidentally struck with a brick in the head, which left him disabled. He was moved into the Kankakee State Asylum for the Insane in Illinois and died there a year later. Pretty sad, dude.
Yeah.
By the year 1900, it was estimated that in Chicago, about 1 in every 4 residents was either a German, immigrated German, or had a parent who was born in Germany. A lot of Germans. No shortage of them. Despite this, George assimilated quickly to American life and was an extremely talented student. He spoke fluent German as well as English, and he excelled in school. Goody two-shoes. When I made the joke about him being sorted into Slytherin, I did that very purposefully, honestly. I know I was high, but still, because he's just a very shrewd, ambitious man. Very much so is a good way to describe him. So I was just like, he would be in Slytherin.
Yeah. Agreed.
Definitely. So, however, Remus' life would change dramatically when his father's rheumatism set in, so like really bad arthritis to the point of where you can't move. And he began to deteriorate, you will not defeat me, English language, rapidly, which meant that George had to drop out of school to take care of his family. And he wasn't really sour about it, though. And in one of my sources, it said he told his father to relax and drink his beer while Remus took care of things. So,
I got this, Pop.
Yeah, like he is like that, though. I mean, shrewd and ambitious, yes, but with that ambition came like a lot of wealth from it, I guess. I don't know. And he wasn't afraid to use it either. Remus would not settle for becoming a factory worker. An unskilled factory worker is how he put it. Or even a traditional skilled worker from his home country. So he didn't want to be a baker, a brewer, a butcher, cigar maker, cooper, or a shoemaker. He's like, I will not be doing these peasant jobs. So at 14 years old, that's kind of how he made it sound. It was very bougie. At 14 years old, Remus began work at a drugstore on the northwest side of Chicago. And Laurel, in case you wondered, I put the exact location. It was where Milwaukee and Chicago Avenue intersect.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
In case you wanted to know, for any locals interested. It was owned by his uncle, George, Karg, Karg. Remus, ever ambitious, performed his duties efficiently and thoroughly until his late teens when he enrolled in the Chicago College of Pharmacy at the age of 19. And this fucking try hard, because that's what he was, Remus passed the required state examination and obtained his pharmacist license. He did it, it's supposed to take 3 years. He did it in something crazy like, I thought I wrote it down. I probably thought I wrote it down and didn't because I was not sober. He did it in like something crazy like it was 18 months. So a year and a half.
Oh,
yeah, like
wow.
half the time. And it was like, okay, try hard. Like, it's okay. Calm down. You don't have to
Damn, George.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. He was not an unskilled man, that's for sure. At 21, Remus bought his uncle's drugstore. Again, try hard. Within 5 years of that, he acquired another. And to top it off, he applied for an optometrist certificate. And it allowed him limited practice. So he couldn't do a whole lot, but he could give you like basic examinations and shit. So he was just like offering more services and goods. He was just expanding upon his business, basically. And he was really good at that. This is a man who never let opportunity pass him by. Let's put it that way.
Optometrist on top of all of it.
I know, like, why not? I'm going to get this certificate too. Remus, hello, first romance began after he met one Lillian Klauf, a customer of one of his drugstores. Doesn't go into the romance much. It just says they were married on July 10th of 1899, so they got right down to business. They had one child together named Romola in 1900. George had not entered the pharmacy industry voluntarily, however, which I'm sure is no surprise to all of you, and he never felt fulfilled by any of these small businesses. And that ambition that I was always mentioning, he began attending law school. Oh, here it is. He completed the 3-year course in only 18 months. There it is. What a tryhard. And in 1900, wow. I know, right? I'm bored. I'm going to go get a law degree. Yeah, casually. So in 1900, the same year as his daughter's birth, he passed the Illinois bar and set up his law office in the landmark Ashland building at 167 North Clark Street in Chicago. And he began as a trial attorney in 1901. The Ashland block was also home to another well-known attorney, Clarence Darrow. Darrow? D-A-R-R.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yep, of course you do. So he is known...
From the evolution trial.
He is known for his role in the Scopes monkey trial of 1925 and the major cases including trade union cases.
Okay, cool.
Same dude, probably?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. His first year, it will be admitted, was a little rough as a trial attorney. He defended 18 persons accused of murder, and sadly, 11 of them were convicted and hanged. It's not a great track record. Yeah, whoopsies. Something that was particularly troubling to Remus, as he was against capital punishment. Didn't believe in it.
There you go.
So, the irony there.
Poor guy.
I know, right? And then there wasn't really a good place to put this, so I just put it in wherever it fit because I thought it was a cool bit of trivia for anyone interested in George Remus. In 1907, he set an endurance swimming record in Lake Michigan for 5 hours and 40 minutes, and that record stood for several decades. So, and that's some cold-ass water because I regularly swim in Lake Michigan. I like it. I enjoy cold water, and it's pretty fucking cold. So, 5 hours is a long time.
Gosh.
And deep. As his career as an attorney gained momentum, he started to earn the reputation for taking particularly controversial cases or cases that were especially newsworthy. So, that ambition again, there it is. One of his most noteworthy cases was a murder case. He was the defense attorney, and it took place in 1914. William Cheney Ellis, a Cincinnati merchant, was charged with killing his wife, Eleanor Hosea Ellis, in a jealous rage in Chicago's Sherman House Hotel on October 16th of 1913. The case drew national attention, and Remus put up an unheard defense at the time by having Ellis plead guilty to transitory insanity. Oh, yeah. So what he read extensively, he was a big reader, and as a result, he was introduced to the writings of Austro-German psychiatrist Richard Freiherr von Krafft-Ebing. Whew. I took German and I couldn't even struggle through that. So when he read the English version of Krafft-Ebing's book, The Textbook of Insanity, he made the argument that it was possible for a person to commit a heinous crime, go to sleep, and wake up and not remember what they had done. The trial lasted... Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Right? That's what I said. I was like, that's bullshit. But then again, it's 1907 right now, so I'm like, what do I know? The trial lasted more than 3 weeks and became one of the most photographed trials in the history of the Cook County Courthouse at the time. So interesting. The verdict came back as guilty for William Cheney, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, it was said that the verdict was pretty narrow among jurors, with a lot of people not sure one way or the other. That's actually kind of important. By 1916, George Remus had built up a very successful law practice and was living a comfortable middle-class life with his wife Lillian and daughter Romola in their home on the north side of Chicago. Sadly, as is always the case with any good soap opera and most people's lives, all was not as peaceful as it seemed, as Lillian was threatening divorce back in 1915 based upon reports of another woman. A mistress, you say.
Oh.
I know. But not only that, Remus is also paying all this bitch's bills.
Oh, no.
Which is somehow adds...
There's receipts.
I know, right?
Whatever, yeah.
What an ass. The rumors turned out to be true, as Remus was involved with a young woman in her late 20s by the name of Augusta Imogen Holmes, like Sherlock Holmes. Augusta was working in a deli, and she was in the process of divorcing her current husband, Albert W. Holmes. I don't know if that matters, but they bring him up a couple times. So Augusta lived with her daughter, also on the north side of Chicago, and when her divorce was finalized in 1917, Remus vigorously, that was the word that was used, so I kept it because it seemed important. He vigorously pursued a relationship with her and even moved into the residence about a year later on December 26th of 1918. Shortly after moving in with Imogen, the incident involving Remus and a plumber by the name of Herbert Youngs would demonstrate Remus's tendency for unprovoked violence. Youngs had come into the home to return a watch that the daughter, Ruth, had lost. Youngs demanded a reward. Well, Imogen agreed to provide the reward. She felt it was a little bit excessive and offered Youngs a slightly less. Okay, well then.
Okay.
They began to basically just argue and squabble over the amount when suddenly out of nowhere, Remus appears, punches the plumber in the jaw, and then chases him off the property. Yeah, he was he wasn't afraid of fisticuffs, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah, no. Youngs filed assault charges with the Evanston Police Department, but when the case came up for hearing, Remus, being an attorney, requested a change of venue, and instead the prosecuting attorney dropped all the charges. He was like, yeah, I'm not even going to bother against this guy. So, yeah, he's got a little bit of push and shove there. In the meantime, all of this was extremely public and confirmed Lillian's suspicions of her husband's infidelity, one way to find out, and filed for divorce on the grounds of extreme and repeated cruelty. She testified that Remus had beaten her on several occasions, and the court granted her divorce with $25 a week allowance, which was pretty good back in the day, and the lump sum of $50,000 and another lump sum for their daughter of $30,000. George and Imogen were married in Newport, Kentucky. He wasted no time. On June 25th of 1920, and he began steps to adopt her 13-year-old daughter. In the broader scheme of things, let's zoom out for a second. By 1916, 19 states had enacted prohibition laws, right? We're doing away with alcohol, making the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages illegal. However, there's growing pressure from groups such as Anti-Saloon League to enact federal legislation. and regulation, I guess. The United States Congress passed the Volstead Act, Vol like V as in Victor, on October 28th of 1918. Subsequently, the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified by the necessary 3/4 majority of the states in only 13 months. On January 16th, 1920, the Volstead Act became law and America officially became dry, or at least attempted.
Yeah.
But within 3 months, $500,000 worth of liquor had been stolen from government warehouses. By mid-1920, the federal courts in Chicago had a backlog of more than 600 violations of the Volstead Act.
Oh my
George
gosh.
Remus, meanwhile, while all this is happening, continued to run his law practice, earning $50,000, which, if you were interested, in 2010, that was $630,000.
Shit.
He made bank in whatever he did. With prohibition now the law of the land, he was suddenly defending more clients for liquor law violations than any other felony. In his liquor violation defenses, Remus was becoming disgruntled with Judge Landis in the habit of finding his clients guilty and levying these fees against them, $10,000 or more, which in today's, 2010's money, it would be $126,000, which is a lot, in my opinion. Remus was also increasingly amazed at how nonchalantly his clients went about paying their fees. Some paid with war bonds, while others simply reached into their pockets, pulled out large wads of cash, and just counted out and handed it over.
Oh my gosh.
The ego boost you would get from that.
Yeah, just your big old roll of
right. I was like,
bills.
And I think back then they had $10,000 bills. I've seen one before. We had one at the bank, but they're not good currency now, but at the time they were. And what really got him is, for the most part, many of these were working class backgrounds and minimal education, way less educated than he is, and they're all getting filthy rich, and he's like, what the fuck is going on around me? So Remus liked being an attorney, but the way these men were able to rapidly make money, he began to see prohibition as a great way to make said money. Now, as with all things with George, and I think we know that by now, he was not content just being an ordinary bootlegger, and his goals were far bigger than that. His ultimate ambition was to obtain possession of all the whiskey in the United States.
Just all of it. All of the whiskey.
At the time the 18th Amendment was passed, there were warehouses and breweries and distilleries just sitting full of liquor, wine, and beer, and they're still considered private property due to the fact that they were manufactured before the amendment was passed. Now, Remus, being the attorney that he is, he read the Volstead Act very closely, and he was on the lookout for loopholes. What he found was liquor that was made pre-amendment. There was no order to destroy those batches, so they're still existing as private property, which meant that if Remus could obtain these inventories and properly register them with the government, they could not seize the liquor, as he would have receipts and proof of buying it, therefore it was private property, so somehow it didn't get seized. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that was the loophole. It's important to note that the Volstead Act provision stated that the only way it was legal for a person to sell, purchase, transport, or prescribe liquor was if they obtained a permit for it for medicinal purposes. What Remus did was fulfill prescriptions for medicinal purposes, and then under the table, it was easy for him, because he got the wholesale permit, it was easy for him to divert large quantities, a lot of alcohol, to being bootlegged out. And by purchasing those wholesale permits from the government, he was capable of moving large quantities. It would also help him control the price and supply of the alcohol. So he kind of was monopolizing the market.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay. He wasn't stupid at all. The road was not easy, however, because he began in Chicago. And Chicago, as you can imagine, was already split up between major crime bosses, who, without the paid protection of the corrupt law, he was raided, arrested, and fined. Yes. So finding that his station is not great in Chicago, he moves all his shit down to Cincinnati, where they were starving for booze due to the 18th Amendment. I think it said most of the distilleries and breweries were within 300 miles of Cincinnati at this time in America.
Oh, so, wow.
Yes, the booze was very popular for them. Upon arriving in Ohio, he used his connections as an attorney to obtain old distilleries and obviously the inventory within, and began to diligently organize his illegal enterprises. He is setting it up. The man's not stupid, and he's ready. He's making it happen. With his connections in Washington, from being an attorney, he also acquired 2 additional wholesale drug companies in New York. Central Drug Company and Alps Drug Company. Alps like the Swedish Alps? Swiss Alps? Swiss Alps. Girl. Listeners,
I'm with you. I
be kind. This juniper, whatever, botanical seltzer is taking me for a ride right now. I know it's the Swiss Alps.
You corrected yourself really fast.
I did, because I was like, that's not right, Katie. To transport his liquor, as you do, George created a trucking company, American Transportation Company, and used it to divert his whiskey to a 50-acre farm in what's called the Lick Run, lick like lick run.
Oh yeah.
District of Cincinnati, later dubbed Death Valley due to the rough terrain surrounding it and the armed guards that Remus employed to secure the facility. Lovely. By mid-1921, almost anybody getting bootleg whiskey in the Midwest was getting that liquor from one of Remus's illegal operations. Meanwhile, George Remus, Imogen, and his adopted daughter, Ruth, are living in splendor. And when I mean splendor, I mean holy crap. Remus furnished the home with expensive furniture, rare books, beautiful artwork, and sculpture. Because you must at that, especially in the 20s, please.
Yeah.
Soon after moving in, he added a Grecian swimming pool that he dedicated as the Imogen Baths in honor of his wife. Oh, it's ridiculous. More extravagant parties were held in the Remus home. One more took place on New Year's Eve in 1921, was the stuff of legends. More than 100 guests were invited from as far away as Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, Kansas City, New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. There was also a large contingent of local guests. In fact, the Society of Editors of Cincinnati's newspapers were invited, but they declined. Remus and his guests enjoyed the hours before midnight dancing on the tiled floor surrounding the swimming tank. A special orchestra furnished the music. Dinner was served at the tables which bordered the edge of the water and faced the tank of young women dressed in white turban headdresses. At the stroke of midnight, Remus's young adopted daughter Ruth, impersonating the spirit of New Year, leaped from the diving board into the pool while shouting gleefully, "Happy New Year!"
Oh.
It's insane. I was like, why is this even a detail? So I put it in there for you to know. On an impulse, Remus joined her in the pool, still wearing his tuxedo. The wild and crazy. I know.
Yeah, of course he was.
The whole event was a virtual fairy tale. However, eventually, Remus had enough of the frolicking and placing the responsibility for hosting the evening in the very capable hands of his wife. He politely bid his guests a good night and headed for the sanctuary of his library, where he was served a dish of ice cream and proceeded to read a biography of Abraham Lincoln until nearly dawn. Which sounds like the most Katie thing I've ever heard.
Oh, what a nerd. I love that. He's like, I just need some history to start my new year. And I understand. I understand how that feels.
Of all people, you should. Nonetheless, adding to the Remus legend is an undocumented assertion that writer F. Scott Fitzgerald, prior to the publication of his 1924 epic, The Great Gatsby, met George Remus during numerous visits to the Sealback Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. And his meetings with the gangster George Remus have become an inspiration for the Jay Gatsby character, which a lot of people say, no, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. The shoe fits, first of all, I'm just going to say it, and the similarities, if you've read The Great Gatsby, are insane.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A routine traffic stop would be the beginning of the end for George Remus. One night, early in October 1921, in Hammond, Indiana, police stopped a car being driven by Harold Hughes for a routine traffic violation. The police found a case of whiskey in Hughes's car and arrested him. Hughes informed them that he had bought the whiskey at a place called Death Valley and drew a map of the area. Rat it out, dude. I know. Like, you never squeal. Come on, man. A few nights later, the Hammond police stopped the car of a Thomas Gallagher. His car was packed with cases of whiskey. Federal prohibition agents were called in to interrogate Gallagher. He told them that he had been on his honeymoon and for recreation was transporting a carload of liquor to Chicago. Gallagher also stated that he had knowledge of liquor deliveries being made to 60 cities and towns throughout the Midwest by a group of wealthy men in Cincinnati. I know, what fucking squealers?
Oh.
It's terrible.
Stitches get stitches.
That's what I was saying. On October 23rd of 1921, the federal prohibition agents from Chicago and Indianapolis raided the Death Valley farm. There it is. Cincinnati's chief prohibition agent, James Flora, on Remus' payroll, reluctantly joined the raid. The U.S. Assistant Attorney General Mabel Walker Wildebrandt charged Remus with violations of 5 counts of prohibition laws. Violations of 5 counts, yeah. She also indicted 13 co-defendants who worked for Remus. Remus met with Jess Smith in Washington and was told that the Attorney General would see that he would never go to jail. George Remus established $1 million defense fund, hiring 6 high-paid lawyers, including Elijah Zoline of New York and Michael Ego of Chicago. It's like I-G-O-E. Igo. The 13 co-defendants were sentenced at the same time. On October 7th of 1922, like a year later, Remus was disbarred by the Illinois Supreme Court. Jess Smith continued to assure Remus that he would not go to jail because the Attorney General would obtain a pardon for him. Empty promises.
Wow.
Remus fought his conviction for most of the next 2 years, taking his case to the U.S. Supreme Court where he actually lost. As Remus prepared to leave his Price Hill mansion, on the morning of January 24th, 1924, he gave the power of attorney to his wife, Imogen. She gained possession of their lavish home, over $1 million, and in 2010 that would be $12,800,000. In the whiskey withdrawal certificates, so he had $12,800,000 worth of whiskey withdrawal certificates, which is like basically you buy a ticket from the government to sell alcohol, just so you're understanding what that was.
Okay.
A stock in the Fleischmann distillery valued at $300,000 back then. Today, that'd be about $3,650,000. Remus also signed 2 checks, one for $115,000. Today, $1,470,000. Well, this is in 2010. I should say in 2010. Back when things were, so much more reasonable. Laughable. Anyway. So $115,000 to pay his bills, and the other for $100,000 for any other debts that might occur during his imprisonment. So $100,000 then in 2010 would be about $1,280,000. So decent amounts of money.
Okay.
The power of attorney that was provided to Imogen made her de facto head of Remus's $50 million booze empire back in those days. Today's money, that would be $638 million in about in 2010s. Yeah, not a little bit of money.
Wow.
Imogen told him, "Never mind, when this is all over, we will go away somewhere and forget this disgrace." Remus' decision to give his wife power of attorney would prove to be a costly mistake.
Oh, no.
I know. As Remus, under guard, boarded a special railroad car that would take him straight to the Atlanta penitentiary, he gave his diamonds to Imogen, gave his silk shirt to a porter, and rode to prison reading Dante's Inferno. He's
just like reading.
He just loves
things.
Reading. It's he was a Slytherin, I'm telling you. While serving a sentence in Atlanta, Remus faced yet another indictment. In mid-1923, Remus had paid $125,000 to become part owner of a huge Jack Daniels distillery in St. Louis. The distillery contained 30,000 gallons of pre-war whiskey. Remus wanted to remove the whiskey from the distillery in small quantities. He and his partners used electric pumps to drain the whiskey from the barrels in the warehouse into barrels in trucks outside of the distillery. The whiskey was then moved to a farm on the outskirts of St. Louis and diverted to the bootleg market. However, federal prohibition agents somehow discovered the theft when they stopped the truck being driven from St. Louis to Indianapolis, containing 4 barrels of the whiskey that were connected to that Jack Daniel's distillery. As a result, 35 people, including George Remus, were indicted. It only really gets worse from here, so sorry, everybody. It doesn't get very cheery. On November 2nd of 1925, George Remus was released from prison in Atlanta after serving his full sentence. Speaking with reporters in Chicago, he stated that the penitentiary life was not so bad. I could send out for almost anything I wanted, and really, my bill for 18 months, I put in the amount of $17,000. I gave many parties there. Okay. Really?
This guy.
However, this cavalier description of Remus' prison experience contradicted his testimony before the Brookhart Committee in 1924, where he stated he had no special privileges of any kind in prison and had lost almost 23 pounds in 3.5 months. Must be tough. Furthermore, Remus testified that the most desperate criminals in the country were sleeping 6 to 8 feet from him, and he used the same shower as African-American prisoners. So he is racist as well.
Oh.
Yeah. Liberty should have been sweet for Remus, but the deputy marshal was waiting at the prison door. Get wrecked. He served Remus with a warrant for his indictment in the forthcoming Jack Daniels trial in Indianapolis. Remus wasted no time with the U.S. Assistant Attorney General Wildebrandt in Washington, D.C., and told her all he knew about the theft. He was like, I'm not going down for this shit again. Unfortunately for Remus, there was a second officer waiting at the door of the Atlanta penitentiary on the day he was released, and Remus was served with divorce papers.
Oh, double whammy.
I know.
Double barrel right there.
He gets fucking wrecked, dude. Remus had been suspicious for some time that Imogen was involved in an affair. It was not long until her visits to me became less and less frequent. While incarcerated, Imogen had become involved, man, salt in the wound, in a romantic affair with Franklin Dodge, a federal prohibition agent who worked the Death Valley case. Dodge was also assigned to investigate the Jack Daniels distillery that led to Remus' arrest.
Oh, shit.
I know. Even worse, Franklin Dodge had come into possession of $200,000 worth of liquor withdrawal certificates, those wholesale ones, that had been owned by Remus. Dodge attempted to sell them, which is fucking illegal, in New York before selling them to Matt Hinkle, a former prize fighter from Cleveland. Despite the fact that Dodge was caught and forced to resign as a prohibition agent, the Assistant Attorney General declined to prosecute him. Remus blamed Imogen for her emotional and financial infidelity. I trusted her so much I gave her power of attorney to dispose of all my property as she saw fit. And she saw fit to cheat me and divide it up with Franklin Dodge.
Oh,
yeah. Moreover, Remus still had to serve yet another sentence in Dayton, Ohio, because it's not done yet, resulting from a conviction in 1922 trial from operating his, illegal farm in Death Valley. At midnight on April 26th of 1927, he was finally released. George Connors, one of Remus' old bootlegging associates, drove him home to Cincinnati, where he arrived at his Price Hill mansion at about 4 a.m. He found the doors and windows locked and spiked with nails. He crawled through a kitchen window, where he discovered the home completely stripped of all its furnishings. The furniture was gone, chandeliers had been removed from the ceilings, stacks of books were piled up where the bookcases had been, and even the rookwood pottery lining of the swimming pool had been stripped. In his bedroom, Remus found only an old cot and a pair of men's shoes that did not fit. When Remus went around to the back of the house, he found all his clothes piled up by the back porch. Emotionally distraught, Remus fell on his knees and wept like a baby. According to George Connors, several days later, Remus had a breakdown.
Oh, damn.
Dude, it's rough. That's rough for anybody. George Remus was determined to seek revenge for Imogen's infidelity. Though she had filed for divorce on August 31st of 1925, the divorce case was delayed several times by suits, countersuits, and continuances in the legal system in America. During one deposition taken in the Chicago law office of Imogen's attorney, Remus suddenly became enraged and attempted to throw him out of the window. Furthermore, both Remus and Imogen accused each other of plots to kill the other one. When they appeared in court, they usually had to have bodyguards.
Oh, shit.
I know. On October 6th of 1927, the day the divorce suit was finally scheduled to be heard in domestic court in Cincinnati, Remus found out that Imogen and her daughter were staying in the Alms Hotel. Remus had his driver take him over to the hotel that morning and waited until Imogen and Ruth emerged and got into a taxi. Remus then pursued them at high speed into Eden Park, where his driver cut off the taxi, forcing it into a curb. Imogen jumped out of the cab and began to run up the hill with Remus in pursuit. According to Ruth, Remus was cursing and swearing and acting like he was crazy. He grabbed my mother, saying, "I'll fix you, I'll fix you." When he caught up with her, Remus put a revolver to Imogen's abdomen and pulled the trigger.
Oh, no.
He then calmly walked out of the park. It was only the second time in his life that Remus had handled a firearm. And 2 hours later, following emergency surgery at Bethesda Hospital, Imogen died.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Remus immediately turned himself in to Cincinnati police. When a reporter later asked Remus why he did not take flight from justice, Remus responded, "Why should I go about the country a fugitive from justice? A man with a price upon his head. If you have a clear conscience and you have nothing to fear. A man who feels he has performed a duty to society and has committed no moral wrong does not run from the consequence of his act." He's so dramatic.
Fuck, dude. I don't know if that's exactly how that went, but okay.
Right?
Whoa.
Upon learning from a police lieutenant that he had accomplished what he set out to do, which was to kill Imogen, Remus replied, "She who dances down the primrose path must die on the primrose path. I'm happy. That is the first peace of mind I've had in 2 years." Later, Remus stated, "I had hoped to get Franklin Dodge too."
Oh,
Man
he was hoping they were together.
Oh, yeah. He was scorned, man. He was an angry man. Remus was indicted, of course, for first-degree murder. A spectacular trial followed that lasted nearly 6 weeks and was covered by every major newspaper. While the trial lasted 5 weeks and 2 days, it took the jury only 19 minutes to deliver the verdict of not guilty. On the sole ground of insanity, juror Robert Hosford told the press there was never a question about the acquittal. So in all my sources, he gave this insanely, you heard how dramatic he is? He had this insanely elegant response and like appealed to like what a broken man he was, and that all these German-born jurors wouldn't throw a man to the dogs, and like, I'm paraphrasing insanely right now, but he appealed to them like hardcore that he was just a broken man, and they bought it for sure.
Wow, they sure did.
19 minutes. On December 30th of 1927, the Hamilton County Probate Court in Cincinnati found Remus insane and committed him to the Lima State Hospital for the criminally insane. 2 months later, the Court of Appeals agreed, declared Remus sane, and released him from the Lima State Hospital. Yep. After his release from the hospital, George Remus never pursued his nemesis, Franklin Dodge. Interesting, huh? In May of 1931, Dodge was sentenced to 30 months in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary for giving false testimony to a grand jury in the case of the Georgia bootlegger in 1930. Get wrecked, that's called karma. Oh, yeah. Remus spent the majority of his remaining years filing lawsuits attempting to reclaim his personal property and fragments of his illegal booze empire, such as the distilleries. He maintained a real estate office in downtown Cincinnati and slowly faded from the public light. George Remus died at the age of 76 on December 20th, 1952. At his home in 1810 Greenup Street, Covington, Kentucky, he was laid to rest without any fanfare in a cemetery in Falmouth, Kentucky. And incidentally has a bourbon named after him.
He does, yeah. Wow, Katie.
Right?
What a wild ride that was.
Oh, yeah. I know, and I was I had to read through it a couple times, and I was like, sometimes it feels like people are writing weird soap operas sometimes. You're like, there's no way this actually happened.
There is definitely a whole roller coaster that was happening in that story. That was nuts. But yeah, that's fate. The king of the bootleggers, as they called him.
There he is.
Yeah, George Remus. I first heard of him. I mean, I was familiar with it from the bourbon bottles, but I didn't.
Right.
I'm not a bourbon drinker, so I know I've seen it and heard it before, but I wasn't really familiar with it past that. But I heard it from our good friends over at History's Greatest Idiots. They did an episode on him. And I'm like, this is nuts. Like, there's a lot going on in this. So Lev and Derek, they did that. Which was great. And I was like, oh, would love to talk about that sometime.
They have like super amazing content if you like crazy shit.
Like they do.
You won't be bored during one of those episodes. I'll tell you that.
No, the well is always
it runneth over with fools. I'll tell you that.
Fools, yeah,
fools,
idiots in history. So thank you for bringing that to the Smoke Circle tonight as part of our.
As I'm sitting amongst the bourbons.
Yeah, so it's bringing a little bit of sports history and bourbon history and bootlegger history sort of stuff to my mister who went on a snack quest. I know he was starting to get a headache. So,
we lost him, dude. We lost him. This is the danger of what happens here. I'm overly high.
Too many disco Manhattans. It's fine.
Bless him.
But yeah, this was the wrap up of season 3. We'll be back again in 6 weeks. It's September 13th.
Yeah, just in time for school to start, right?
Yeah, just a little after. Yeah. So September 13th, we'll be back again for season 4. And so that's going to be a whole lot of fun, a lot more history for you. Thank you so much for making season 3 a huge grower for us. That the last few weeks we've had. Not a shower, just growing. We're cool. We're calm, calm and collected.
We're not present in gym class.
Yeah, we just, we're there when you need us. I don't know. It's getting out of hand. But we've just had like this little spike in growth the last few weeks, which has been really cool. So if you're a new listener, thank you. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Sorry that you're a new new subscriber, as we're ending a season. But hey, you get a whole back catalog.
I was going to say,
a lot of episodes that you can go back and listen to.
There's a lot to dive into. Rounding season 3 out with some adventure history. Should be fun before we go on our, take our summer break before fall hits. And we'll be back again for season 4, which will come out on September 13th. I'm going to have some fun on my break. I'm going to go on a little adventure. Katie, I hope you have a great break. I hope you all have a great break as well. And we'll be back again with you. If you miss us, please follow us on Instagram at Hightailing History or on TikTok at Hightailing History Pod. That's where we are the other days of the week when we're not here hanging out with you. In the meantime, folks, get money, get high, give love, and get 8 hours sleep or more at night, okay? You need to be well rested. Stay hydrated and look after yourself.
Yeah, take care of yourself. We look forward to seeing you again for season 4. Bye-bye.
Bye.